Mixed Media Movies.
And welcome back to Mixed Media Live. Today we've got a huge topic that I'm just going to jump into. No intro. We're just going to go right into it, and it is the metaverse. So the first question, and I think this is always good to lay the groundwork with, is why are we talking about it? You know, like what is the reason why we should be talking about this? So just for some background information, on October 28th, 2021, Facebook rebranded itself into Meta Platforms, which is actually its full name, not Meta. So it's doing business as Meta, random fact, and changed its logo to probably one of the ugliest rebrandings I've ever seen. If I were doing the branding for their company, that is not the logo I would have picked for them at all. In fact, their typeface is also ugly somehow, in my humble opinion.
Look up Meta logo, as I just did now, to remember what it is. The images don't even give you the Meta logo.
Oh yeah, it's bizarre.
Other logos that are Meta, called Meta.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking about that other logo in a moment, so that's going to be an interesting topic for discussion. But yeah, I mean, I think everything about their rebranding sucks. I think Facebook doesn't really do good branding, period. I don't know if they ever really did. Yeah, but that's a whole other discussion, not for now. But also to give you a background of what Facebook owns. So Facebook, aka Meta, I'm probably going to interchange them unintentionally here and there, owns a ton of brands. In fact, the only product that they actually developed is Facebook. Like the Blue app is what they call it internally at Facebook, the Blue app. And I guess if you consider it a separate product, they also own Messenger, or developed Messenger. Pretty much everything else they bought, which is what I'm about to list now. So, and this is a partial list. This is not a total list. So they own, of course, Facebook social media. They own Messenger. And then all the things they bought include Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus, the VR headset company, Jiffy, if you know what Jiffy is, the app where you...
That's wild.
Yeah, it's the app where you can pull up a GIF by searching and put it in the chat of something or another. They own Beat Games. Do you know what Beat Games owns, Nathan?
Never heard of that in my life.
Can you take a guess?
Beat Games? Oh, do they own Beat Saber?
Yeah, they own Beat Saber. So
wait, when did they acquired it? Wait, when did that happen?
I actually don't know. But there you go. Now you know. And they own a company called Customer with a K, which basically does I guess customer support chats for small businesses, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm not gonna name. But those I think are the most notable, and shows you a whole breadth of spaces. Right, you've got everything from social media to hardware to gaming to chat, a whole bunch of different spaces. And each one of those things has pretty much become a behemoth in itself in terms of what types of services they provide. Instagram used to be a, simplistic's not the word, minimalist. There you go. A minimalist photo sharing platform for amateur photography. And then it became basically Facebook app part 2. And that's pretty much their development path. And I'm talking about Facebook entirely right now for a reason, but we'll get to it. So that Meta logo that you're seeing when you search Meta that doesn't match the Facebook Meta logo, that Meta logo is actually the original company called Meta. And this is something people don't know. So I didn't write down the year, but I think it was 2015 or 2018. I can't remember. Facebook's nonprofit arm, which is called the Zuckerberg and his wife's last name Foundation, which unlike the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is so Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is owned by Bill and Melinda Gates, obviously, but they do stuff outside of Microsoft. So Microsoft does not own Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Whereas in Facebook's case, Facebook actually owns its nonprofit arm, which is called the Zuckerberg, whatever. I can't remember her last name for the life of me. Sorry. Nonprofit. So it's actually owned by Facebook. And this nonprofit bought a company in either 2015 or 2018 called Meta. And this company was doing, I think, nonprofit research into big data for scientific literature. So I guess they're trying to aggregate scientific literature and then pull out, information using big data tools. So the funny thing is, in 2019, they transfer the rights of the name Meta to Facebook. So since Facebook owns this nonprofit, they can do that, right? They own the IP associated with Meta, including its name. They take the IP Meta and transfer it to itself, and then announce that it's going to dissolve it by 2022. The company Meta, the original company Meta. So just think about that for a moment. They bought a company under their nonprofit arm, pretty much just for their name. I mean, I can make that conjecture. Maybe they got a few tools out of it as well, so it was kind of like a happy coincidence. But they ripped their name and then destroyed the nonprofit in the process. Yeah, like meta-analysis, exactly. And as soon as they took their name, as soon as they were ready for rebranding, they just destroyed the company, which makes no sense from a nonprofit perspective, because you would think that, if you bought the company, you just believe in the objectives of this entity. And even if you remove the name, you would just rename it to something else, like, I don't know, meta-analysis or something like that, but instead, they decided to just destroy it, which kind of makes me feel like they just bought this nonprofit, put in a nonprofit arm because it looked good in the portfolio, and then destroyed it for its name, which is kind of crazy. That's the type of wealth that Facebook has, and also questionable ethics, especially because, is that a for-profit use? I don't know. I don't know if it is or not, considering they rebranded their entire multi-billion-dollar company to the name that they got from their nonprofit arm. It's kind of strange. In any case, that's the logo that you see, though. When you search Meta, that is the logo. The old logo of the old company is what usually comes up. And then, of course, they named their company Meta after this term that you've been hearing a lot more lately, which is called Metaverse, which I will be explaining right now. So that's the why we're talking about this, is that Facebook has kind of come on and blasted. I mean, Facebook's a huge brand. For them to rebrand around one singular concept is a big deal. One of the biggest companies in the world, right? And so let's first understand what a metaverse is. So using Wikipedia's definition, and, you can quibble with it, whatever, but, I think it generally encompasses the idea as many people would say it. A metaverse is, quote, a network of 3D virtual worlds focused on a social connection. So that's pretty broad. In fact, you could say, there's nothing about that necessitates VR or any sort of like physical interaction or something that's perceived as physical. That sounds like it could be something like an MMO, right? Or like Minecraft or something like that could fit under the definition of metaverse if Minecraft communicates with some other entity, right? If you made a mod that, like, I don't know, data from some entity enters Minecraft and then there's some interaction happening or cross chat, I don't know, you could call that a sort of metaverse. And in fact, the term is very old. It's from 1992, and it's from a sci-fi novel called Snow Crash that I know nothing about. But it became popular by the time the book Ready Player One was written, I think in the 80s, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Either the 80s or the 70s, I can't fully remember.
Just saying that there are so many like technological terms that were like came to be in the late 1900s and just appear like in full force like around in the past decade. It's pretty common.
Yep. And then of course Ready Player One would become a Spielberg movie coming out of not too long ago in the grand scheme of things. And then there's the proto-metaverse, or Metaverse Is. And these are claiming to be metaverses, or, people in these industries claim that they've already created metaverses, which, like I said, is MMOs, Minecraft, and Roblox. Roblox. Does that make sense? Just think about how Roblox works.
Can you repeat the sentence? Sorry. what was the thing you said?
Well, I said a list of proto-metaverses, at least what these people claim to be. These people have claimed to be already metaverses, which one of them includes Roblox. And that makes sense because it's one sort of platform where you can hop from game to game to game. And these games are sort of like self-contained in of themselves, but your character persists and your I guess, relationships or friends or online friends persist throughout the platform. So it is sort of like a simpler type of metaverse. But Roblox will be coming back, and we'll be talking about that later. So Meta, or Facebook, made a huge mad dash for this word, this pre-existing word that had a community already existing. In fact, there was a whole decentralized platform community. When I say that, I mean a whole bunch of people who were interested in decentralizing different types of games, different sorts of chats, a lot of VR-related stuff, that were creating these sort of decentralized platforms that could sort of self-run, self-govern, or govern in some unique ways that didn't require like a central, company or anything like that, that were coming around. So people have been using this term, but just not in the mainstream. And then Facebook comes around, renames itself Meta, and then sort of takes over the word metaverse as if it's this they didn't, I don't think they ever portrayed it as a new concept per se, but as if they're taking the concept and now it's their concept. So that's where we are now with Metaverse. So yes, they're the ones to centralize the entire process. If you watch the really cringe Metaverse ad, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I wish I had it on tap so I could just put it up right now, but it is extremely cringe. It is very corny. Mark Zuckerberg should never be in any promo material. He's not a very personable person. And it's very bad.
It's funny. I had one of my professors as an undergrad. She was Mark Zuckerberg's RA when he first came out with Facebook. She was one of the first 10 people to actually have a Facebook account. She would sometimes, talk about him, but very, very briefly. She'd always stress that she was one of the first 10 people to have a Facebook account and that she no longer has one.
Does that mean she didn't like him? Is that
well, at least she no longer saw utility in having an account, I guess. But it was always funny. She'd always mention that she was Mark Zuckerberg's RA at Harvard when he first came out, first released like the beta version of Facebook.
Yeah, that is interesting. So basically they've come on the block, said, we are the ones who are going to take this centralized, or we're going to make this idea centralized. If you watch the ad, they basically say that what they're going to do is be the platform for everyone else to plug into. So they're not saying we're going to create all of the metaverse components, right? We're not going to create the individual 3D experiences, although I'm sure they're going to create some of them. Instead, we're going to be the common link that brings together all platforms into one umbrella centralized, existence, which is very antithetical to the culture that already existed around the metaverse, which is extremely DeFi, sort of decentralized everything, right? From finance to VR worlds to everything decentralized. But they just came and did that. Now, they got sued a few times by different entities that claimed to have rights over the word metaverse because people were so mad and demanded that these entities sue them. They're not going to win any of those suits. None of those entities properly trademarked or did anything, to safeguard the term. So these are all suits that are probably not going to work out, my limited knowledge. The last thing about the sort of general background is that they want it to be blockchain backed. Now, this is the part that has been the thorn in their side this entire time. Facebook has been trying to create its own cryptocurrency for the past 5 years, basically. And it constantly gets rejected by either the EU courts or the US courts because apparently that's the thing that makes them a monopoly finally, is creating a cryptocurrency. Although I think they're already there, but that's a whole other thing. So they haven't been able to fully spool that idea, but they want this thing to be blockchain-backed, crypto-backed, with a Facebook-specific cryptocurrency. They don't want to use Ethereum or Bitcoin. I hope I don't get ruined on Facebook for mentioning those terms. Not Facebook, on YouTube. I think YouTube's very sensitive to those terms. You know what I'm talking about. The coins out there that you can purchase that are somewhat decentralized on, whether it's a decentralized platform or a centralized platform like Coinbase or something like that. I probably shouldn't have said that word either. Whoops. That's their vision. That's what a metaverse is. In terms of imagining the sort of things that they want you to be doing on their platform, you can imagine playing games, playing Super Hot. If you heard of that VR game, it's like the quintessential VR game. And while you're playing Super Hot, you can chat with your friends, like as they spectate physically in Super Hot or something like that. And that sort of integration is facilitated by Facebook, that you can sort of cross between platforms. Oh, my friend's at the museum. Let me just jump from my Super Hot game while I have my Oculus headset on and jump into the museum, a virtual version of the museum that they're Ben's shaking his head. It gets a lot worse, Ben. A virtual museum, and I can look along with the paintings as long as I pay in some Facebook cryptocurrency, to gain entrance to that museum. So that's the sort of idea that we have here in terms of what they're imagining. Naturally, there are a lot of red flags that come up. Now, I have to warn you, when I was doing research for this episode, I was not expecting to find the original red flags that I had written down were not the same as, like, I just wanted a few citations for a few things I was going to say. And then I ended up just mostly down a Wikipedia rabbit hole that led to some depths that you will be seeing. I'm actually going to post, I'll post it while I'm speaking, a link to all of the wiki pages and Forbes articles and all the things that I ended up finding by accident, pretty much, about the red flags I'm going to be talking about here. I think the first thing before we go into those red flags is to understand how Facebook or Meta makes money. So what is their business model? So we talked about business models in my last segment 3 weeks ago when I was talking about freeware. And so I'm actually going to be doing a lot of this. I'm going to be weaving a lot of these topics together to create sort of a tapestry. So I think it would be helpful for people to understand the current landscape of mostly, I'm coming at this from a perspective of art, but I think it's a helpful thing in general to understand sort of the economics and social sort of things happening, to understand sort of what's going on the grand sort of macro scale of everything. Google is basically a direct competitor to Facebook, supposedly, at least. So Google, Google's model is very similar to Facebook's model, where they both depend on ads, right, to make most of their money. In fact, Facebook way more so. So Facebook makes a lot more % of total pie off of ads than Google does. And they go by this optimization strategy, as we talked about in the last episode, which is basically grabbing data, grabbing platforms where you can get more data, providing free services where you can gather more data in order to optimize your experiences on their platform, so that hopefully you click more on the ads, and you click on more on the ads, they can charge the business for that click. So that's basically the stated business model. So that's one way they make money, is from ad optimization. The second way they make money is through government contracts. So much like Google, they have government contracts. We talked about this with the Google sort of situation where it's like
Facebook government contracts, what do they do?
So they currently have their most current contract is with the State Department. That's a whole rabbit hole I'm not going to get into. But yes, they have government contracts. And like we all know, government contracts are sort of a bottomless wallet that you can always suck from, basically. I used to work at a defense contractor called SciTech. Great company doing absolutely essential work. I was very lucky because I would not be doing defense work unless I thought it was essential, pretty much. And I was pleased to see that it actually was pretty great work happening at that defense company. But what I do know from my experience there, and no slander, is that the government's wallet is bottomless. Even for a smaller company like SciTech, it is very easy for the company to absolutely siphon money from the government for kind of interesting contract structures. But that's a whole other topic. The third way they make money is through partnerships with traditional media. And so this is the same as Google does, as a lot of these companies, social media companies, they do, is they give traditional media. So traditional media means like, your cable news, your print news, like those sorts of things, your late night talk shows, those sorts of traditional media. They give them prime placement. So they've individually negotiated with CNN, with whatever. Name your traditional media. They've individually negotiated with those contracts to give them prime placement on the top of searches, on the top of topics, or hashtag, whatever you want. These sorts of things. You give them prime placement by contract. The fourth way is they sell devices, which is a relatively minor way. In fact, they lose money overall on the device sort of angle, which is like Oculus. They also sell smart devices, like there's a Facebook Watch, and they're coming out with a whole line of smart and home devices. And guess how much? Do you want to guess how much? Actually, I'll have you guys guess. How much does Facebook make per user, do you think, per year?
I'm trying to think if it's an absurdly large amount or absurdly low amount, right? Like what kind of range are we talking here? I mean, so per just user of any of their services, pretty much, you just average them all. I'm going to say it's considerably high. I don't think I can put a number to it.
Ben, you have a guess?
I don't know. Let's go with a nice neutral $100.
Okay, so it's actually much lower than $100. It's actually $5K? No, not 5K. It's $20 a person. $20 a person. Now, I'm just going to let this sit for a moment. Can anyone think of what's wrong with that in terms of what's your immediately? Okay, think like an investor. Think like you're buying stocks in Facebook, and they make $20 per user. There's one question. I invest, so there's an immediate question that came into my mind when I found this number online. What's wrong with this?
Is that money per user of Facebook or a user of any and all of their
services?
Okay. That makes a little more sense.
It's active users, I believe. What?
So I guess I have two thoughts. One is okay, how much do they spend on is this profit or revenue?
This is profit. So this is after expenses.
That is including. Okay, cool. So anyway, my question is I don't know. I find that pretty low because I think about any company that sells a $20 product, right? They've already beat you out in terms of their.
Actually, you've got it right there. You've hit the nail on the head. Some other company could sell something for $20 easily, you would think, which wraps back, and I guarantee you, people at Facebook have had this conversation. I guarantee you, Wall Street investors know this conversation too, because if I immediately thought of it, they all thought of it for sure. $20 is not a lot for you to pay out of pocket for the services per year. So take Facebook's model, which is ad optimization mostly. Go ahead.
I mean, what if they just took their services and removed all the ads and said you pay $20? That's just a simpler way. Because the expenses are now cut. The expenses are now zero, right? Because no longer have to pay money, to do all their ad research and stuff like that, which is their prized possession.
Absolutely.
Right? So they just said you pay, either you can maybe have the ad option still there, although somewhat inefficient in terms of cost, because now you still have to pay for ad R&D and stuff like that. Although less, because you're not relying on that all too much. But you can be pay $20, here's your ad-free version. There you go. And you're done. And the thing is, it's a recurring payment, right? So that's 1 year, right? I mean, you could, if you wanted to, also just change the price to, let's say, $25, and wow. I mean, a $5 increase per person using a Facebook product is actually insane at that point, at that scale, right? So you can increase by $1, whatever,
That's exactly my question as an investor. So my immediate question is, Facebook, why don't you have a $30 a year plan? Or actually, you could probably do a $35. I mean, how much would people pay? And this is a genuine concern many, many users have, which is that Facebook is constantly looking for ways to track because they're on this ad optimization sort of regime, right? It's something that people complain about with Google too. So despite what you think about whether that's a legitimate concern or not, why not offer the choice and make more margin off of offering the choice? So think about the difference between $20 and $30. That's a 50% increase in profits on the individual user. So even if only a third of your users take that option, or maybe that's too big. I mean, I actually think a third of their users probably would take that option. But let's say only 10% of the users take that option. That's a free 50% extra that you're making off of those 10% of your users for literally zero cost. All you're doing is providing the option to opt out of Facebook tracking services, all that, customized ads. You get clean feeds that are not full of ads, right? Like we all hate scrolling through the platforms.
The question is like, why is it like this?
Oh yes, we're gonna get to that. So Sockflip says, but profits need to be exponential. If everyone migrates to a fixed subscription a year, how do you squeeze out more money in the future? Well, this is the Netflix problem, right? So you have a point, right? So with Netflix, they only have a subscription model, meaning the only way they can make money is off of people adding more subscriptions to their total portfolio. And there are literally a limited number of people in the world who can afford their services. So at a certain point, they start to plateau, which is why Netflix has been doing very poorly stock performance-wise, is because they're sort of hitting a plateau. In fact, they peaked to their maximum pretty much during the pandemic. And then as things started opening up, they dropped back to their previous levels. And so it sort of demonstrated a sort of limited profit reach that you could possibly get without innovating your product more, right? Or charging more for your services. So you have a point there. But the difference though with Facebook is that Facebook has two modes of profit, one of which is the ads and one of which is the subscription, or potentially two modes. And so that adds actually a lot more flexibility than you think. So now you can add another tier maybe that does something else, or maybe you could increase your prices, which is traditional, and you could definitely increase it at the rate of inflation easily. At the same time, you can sort of beef up your ad optimization while you're focusing on subscriptions. And then if the subscription game is not working out well, then you can focus back on, you can sort of mix and match sort of how things are going. And you should probably still see that exponential increase. Why I mentioned that whole economics thing is a particular reason, is because take all of those ways they make money and apply it to their rebrand to the metaverse. And that will inform how we're going to imagine what this metaverse is going to look like, how they make money, and how that will combine itself with their vision of the metaverse. The next red flag is that there's no competitive resistance. Just think about that real quick. There's basically no competitive resistance. So let's all get in the shoes of Microsoft real quick. This is baffling to me. Microsoft owns Xbox. They just bought a ton of game studios. They own social media platforms. Will mixed media be available in the metaverse? To be seen. It depends on which metaverse, I guess. You own some VR stuff. You own Windows. Which means you basically own the window into PC gaming. You own a bunch of game studios, and you own a social media platform called LinkedIn that you already know how to manage, right? So you've already figured out that game. So you've got the social component, because LinkedIn's actually a wildly popular platform, and it's growing exponentially. So they figured out the social with LinkedIn. They figured out the gaming with all their games. They figured out the hardware. They have VR hardware as well. Why isn't Microsoft saying, you, sir, it's not your metaverse, it's my metaverse? Why aren't they saying that? Why isn't that the natural? Why isn't that the natural reaction? Let's go to Google. Google has Stadia, which I know they're phasing out, but that demonstrates cloud computing, which Microsoft also has, which is very useful for a metaverse. Google has, into the gaming world through Stadia with all the relationships they made. Does Google own any game studios, Nathan?
I want to say no, but it's decent chance of missing something. I can't think of any Google game. I'll look it up while you continue, but I don't think.
Okay. Well, so they demonstrated all of that. They have VR hardware. They've got it into your phone through Samsung, Samsung and others through Android. They've got it into your phone, so that's got mobility, which is very useful for the metaverse. They've got all of that. Says no, Google got rid of all their studios. Okay, thank you for that. They've got all of that into the metaverse technology space, but they're not saying, no, Facebook, you're not making the metaverse. we're making the metaverse. Amazon has AWS. It has, which is cloud computing. It's got, and AWS is the number one performer in cloud computing by far, and they're making tons of money off of AWS. So it's a successful project. They've got Twitch, which is a gaming streaming platform, pretty much. They've got content right on their platform, and they've got goods that they can sell you through ads on their platform. All that. They've got an ad service. Google has an ad service. Microsoft has an ad service. All these people are absolutely not just silent. Many of them are on board. Meaning, yes, Mr. Zuckerberg, we'll plug in to your metaverse. Just think about that for a moment. How bizarre that is. That is extremely bizarre. And it will get more bizarre. But that is a red flag to me. As an investor of those other companies, I'd be like, is it actually more efficient for you to go this route or what? What are we doing here? Oh, actually, sorry, I want to mention one example. I said I would come back to it. Roblox has been extremely gung-ho about Facebook and the metaverse. So they've been totally, trumpeting it. Probably the largest smaller entity that is sort of saying metaverse is here, it's arrived, it's Facebook. Go ahead.
Dollar is bigger than Nintendo at this point, right? In terms of value.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, compared to the massive giants we're talking about, like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, they're small potatoes. Yeah. But Nathan, you remember that quote? Was it you that came up with the news article with Roblox that was interesting, where Roblox CEO, I believe, made it, or someone in the Roblox executive board made a statement about what their vision for Roblox was?
If I did, I don't recall that, but
I remember this, although I don't remember what the actual announcement was.
Was this recently or
no, months ago?
Oh boy.
But basically, he said something about 3-year-olds playing with adults and it being a symbiotic, fun atmosphere.
I don't know. There it is.
There it is. Which I thought was the most bizarre thing for it to come out of a human's mouth. But we'll get to that. Another red flag is that Meta has been trying to create its own, like we mentioned, blockchain and not using an established blockchain like Ethereum. But anyway, so the e-cryptocurrency would be a natural fit because it's the most established functional blockchain there is out there. You could argue that there are better ones in the making, like things I can't name. But Ethereum has been established basically as the current dominant blockchain for functional use. So, which is weird because if you're truly, as benevolent as you say you are as Facebook, you want to create the future world where no one's discriminated because everyone wears avatars and everything is a beautiful place. And everything is perfect. Why wouldn't you use a more open platform like Ethereum that divests control away from you and towards the public? Well, maybe it's because you don't want to divest control away from you and towards the public. And then, this part was strange to me. Right after the announcement, or not right after the announcement, I should say, a few weeks after the announcement, there was a crop of media articles that absolutely started pushing the metaverse like crazy, like unasked for, unsolicited, just like, here's how your workplace will be in the metaverse. Here's how, those kinds of articles. I'm sure you've seen them when you've scrolled through, ads or whatever, or in the trending or whatever, wherever you find them. These things were trending on the platforms that they are supporting, which is interesting. But these articles about the metaverse just came quick, fast, and plentiful, as if everyone in the mainstream news knew exactly what a metaverse was the moment that the announcement was made, and knew all the clickbait articles to make to get everyone hyped and excited about the metaverse. It didn't seem so organic as if it came from the people, right? It wasn't that the people started learning about the metaverse and then articles came after. It was like the metaverse appeared and then informed the people. So it went the other way around. It wasn't responding to a trend. It made the trend, if you get what I'm saying. And then there is, I'm getting deeper and deeper into this. So hold on tight. There was mounting government pressure for censorship on Facebook, right? So, I mean, there's all a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to talk about specific issues. I'm not going to get into that. But we've got sort of the executive branch as a whole sort of bearing down on Facebook, saying that it's got to control discussions happening on the platform. And the second thing is we had that recent Facebook whistleblower. Do you remember who that was? Do we remember who what the conclusion of that whistleblower blowing sort of news outbreak was? It was what? That
we need more censorship, essentially, or something.
Right, exactly. So basically, Facebook needs to control itself more, and it needs to happen from some sort of policy change. And Zuckerberg, for the past 5 to 10 years, has been asking for the government to make new rules for a new internet. I mean, I remember seeing headlines about this when I was in college, at least, about Zuckerberg saying, and of course I thought nothing of it, but, he was saying, well, the internet's a new place and it needs new rules. And we would like to be at the table of the discussion of that and those new rules so that we can be regulated as a platform correctly. The other thing, again, on this censorship theme, decentralized platforms are under fire for being unregulated. So crypto as a whole is sort of being, criticized for being an unregulated space where, people can't, sort of do monetary policy, on the sort of least concern, and then criminal activities happening on the blockchain on the sort of the most concern. And so the government needs to sort of come in and hamper down the blockchain and decentralized platforms, because inherently by them being decentralized, right, they can't, effectively fight crime or whatever and all that kind of stuff. The FBI has made it a priority in terms of sort of monitoring the blockchain. They've come out with some crazy technologies in order to be able to trace Bitcoin flows through the blockchain. Maybe they'll find a total solution eventually, but they're trying to sort of hamper down on the Bitcoin. If you remember with GameStop, everyone remember the whole GameStop controversy? Ape Strong. I joined in on that for fun. It was some of the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. Just stupidity on Reddit, and unfortunately a lot of people took it too seriously and did not understand the consequences of what the heck they were doing, and lost a lot of money, which it's what happens when you listen to a crowd on the internet. It's also what happens though when things go epically wrong on the exchange side, but that's a whole other discussion. But basically what GME was, or what GameStop was, that GameStop crisis was something that was marching into a market black hole. So I actually was part of a group of people who was just buying a stock, which was going to sort of create a black hole of the stock market and suck in, I'm not going to explain the mechanics of it, all the corporate money into the one black hole. Oh, Nathan says he accidentally turned off his computer. I'm sure he'll be back. But what happened oddly with GameStop was some censorship happened because of GameStop, because it was dangerous for the people who are investing. Although investing is generally an open enterprise, right? I can just download Robinhood and just go ahead and swipe up on GameStop. But there's hampered discussion, and you had sort of politicians saying, well, this is too dangerous to have on platforms like Facebook, right? Then we have all of the sort of politics-related hampering that was happening on Facebook, circa elections, and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is interesting because I think this is something that people don't understand about large businesses. Large businesses want to be regulated. This sounds very strange, but they want to be regulated. Regulation is good for big business. Regulation is amazing for big business. What regulation does is it makes a market maker out of the government. So this is common knowledge if you're an investor, right? A lot of stocks go up and down based off of a government pronouncement, basically. So if let's take the easy example of biotech, right? So if a company has a product that gets approved by the FDA, stock shoots up. But of course, the FDA is an extreme example because we say, okay, we need an FDA, all that kind of stuff. Whole discussion. But it actually happens pretty much on all levels with gigantic companies. So with a large company, let's say let's take a random oil company, let's say like Exxon or something like that. Exxon wants to be regulated because the more regulation there is, the harder it is for a competitor to enter the space because it's so expensive. So And that's true. So like you have an oil company startup who wants to start up in the middle, maybe there's a lot of oil in, I don't know, Washington State or something like that. The regulation is going to be so difficult for that new company to try to drill oil over there that Exxon has an automatic advantage because, one, they're already in the space and they already have enough money to combat the regulatory pressures downward on creating a new company. So Facebook is Facebook regulating itself is actually not odd in of itself. It's the type of regulation. Well, it's odd. It's odd to people because people are not familiar with that kind of sort of business language. To me, I think that's broken, but that's a whole other discussion. But the weird part is that they're asking for a specific thing, which is censorship, which pretty much all their large competitors gain equally from, and pretty much it gives them a reason to say, we're going to clamp down on behavior in any which way we want, which is kind of a dubious thing they can do right now. There's a whole legal jargon I'm not going to get into. But it gives them the permission to clamp down in whatever ways they want, as long as they have that symbiotic understanding with the regulatory bodies. If that horrifies you, that's like literally how all market making sort of government approval things work. That's how they function. Okay, and here's the last one, and here's the craziest one. So again, I'm happy that you stuck along this far with it. But this one is the doozy. So Facebook has a ton of connections, not just with any government body, but with the intelligence community. Now, this is obvious, actually. This is the rabbit hole I fell into by accident. Like, I actually was not looking for this. The only thing I was interested in, I was like, most of these large companies, especially big tech companies, have some sort of founding relationship with particularly the CIA. And I actually did not know that for Facebook, and I just searched Facebook CIA just to verify that this was not a red flag or was a red flag or whatever. And then I fell through a whole rabbit hole on Wikipedia that you can fall into the same rabbit hole if you want, which is every founding board member of Facebook, minus Mark Zuckerberg, has a connection directly to the CIA, and it's all of their Wikipedia pages, and it's fascinating. The sort of CIA-associated people are Jim Breyer, Peter Thiel, Gilman Louis, and Sean Parker. A lot of these names you probably sound very familiar to you because they're very active people. So there's this company, and you can, again, look it up on Wikipedia. It's right in the description on their Wikipedia. There's this company called In-Q-Tel, in-q-tel. Just go on their Wikipedia, and in their description, it just says venture capitalist arm of the CIA, basically. And this company called In-Q-Tel, which is famous for getting companies off the ground and immediately blasted in the public market. In fact, on the Wikipedia, it says that for every dollar that In-Q-Tel invests in a company, they attract $15 more of investment. And you ask yourself, why does that happen? That happens because every other investor knows that those companies are going to do well because In-Q-Tel invests in them. So, they follow the money into the winning company, basically. And basically their goal is to raise capital for companies that can help the CIA in terms of intelligence gathering technologies. They invest in everything from surveillance technology like Palantir. Who owns Palantir? Peter Thiel owns Palantir. But that's a whole other thing. Again, I fell into a thing that I was not expecting to fall into. Gilman Louis was the CEO at one point of In-Q-Tel. And he was one of the first, I think he was the second backer of Facebook, back when Facebook was founded in a college dorm, which is interesting. Jim Breyer brought Gilman Louis in. So Jim Breyer is a colleague of Gilman Louis at a different company called can't remember the name of the company, I'm going to botch it. But basically they were colleagues, they were both board members at a third company, and Jim Breyer told Gilman Louis, hey, this is a project that we should fund, and he brought him in. Sean Parker was recruited to the CIA at the age of 16, which is I'm sure a fascinating story. And this was after the FBI found out about his hacking of colleges and companies. So he was a hacker, and the FBI actually forced him to do community service. He was a minor, so he didn't go to jail. But after he did his community service, CIA comes over and says, "Hey, you're a pretty good hacker. Would you like to join the CIA?" And he said yes. So he started at the age of 16, and the future founder of Palantir, like I was saying, and Palantir, if you didn't know, does police predictions. So they look at a whole plethora of data and try to predict crime. It's like, what's the movie Minority Report? Minus like sort of the Oracle stuff. But yeah, kind of like a Minority Report, where you're taking in tons of data and then you can sort of do crime prediction. And they have tons of contracts already with police departments. I'm sure NYPD has a contract with them. And they also have contracts with the FBI and intelligence agencies as to why, In-Q-Tel would even invest in them to begin with, because Palantir is invested by In-Q-Tel. So I didn't look for this at all. I just kind of fell into it on the Wikipedia pages. I encourage you to look into it on your own. But that's an interesting red flag, because I guess a lot of people don't understand. The internet was a military project. It was a DARPA project. This is common knowledge, so I guess it's not so shocking to most people. But the internet as a whole was a protocol that was originally designed, at least that's what it was presented as, for transferring data between peoples. So like mostly scientists at different universities, at different government bases, and all that kind of stuff, or at least that was the proposition. What you probably don't know is that the internet was also simultaneously a planned use for data gathering by the intelligence agencies for all those people who use the internet. Now that whole experiment pretty much failed, and the internet became sort of a decentralizing force. So that's a whole other topic for another day. But what is Facebook at its core and at its business model? What does it do as its core business model? It gathers data, right? Like that's its literal core business model. And what does it refuse to do? It refuses to allow the option for you to, what? Buy your way out of the process, in an obvious profit-making way, right? So Facebook is essentially a gigantic dream for the intelligence agencies. And if you don't, I know a lot of people get weird about this stuff, so I'm just going to name a few things that are known things that the intelligence community has done domestically, because a lot of people, they'll just say the CIA is for foreign, actually Ben's did a segment where he was talking about something that sort of bled in domestically about the CIA. What was it again, Ben? It was
so they there's actually not so much domestic. They're involved with artistic propaganda in a sense, anti-Soviet stuff. So they would send in copies of literature and things like that, and also some involvement in in how music, like Russian music, was being talked about, and Russian arts in general were being talked about, including I I talked about how the president's personal advisor on music, and his views on Shostakovich and that kind of stuff, shaping national discourse actually on art.
Yeah, and definitely shout out to a future episode I'm going to be doing on the CIA in Hollywood that's going to tie into all this stuff pretty beautifully. And that's going to be more of a historical look than, right. Well, actually, probably look at stuff right now. But the interesting thing is that, we say this, we say we pay the lip service to it, but we've got, I created a short list just off the top of my mind of things that we learned about in school that the CIA and other intelligence agencies did. So there's MK Ultra, which we all know what that is, testing drugs on domestic, people, citizens. Gigantic program, acknowledged by Reagan in the 80s, where we finally got a formal apology from the government that MK Ultra happened. There was the Snowden incident with the NSA, where they're just snooping on all of your calls and the metadata for all of your calls because they happen to be located in a foreign server. And Snowden talked at my alma mater. So that's not I don't think that's a weird thing to say for sure. And we've got the Operation Northwoods. This is probably a little less known, but there's a chance you know about this, but you can Wikipedia this very, very easily. Operation Northwoods was where the generals asked President Kennedy to create a fake boat sinking attack near Cuba to sort of initiate a war between the United States and Cuba. You know, this is Cold War time, so this was desirable for a variety of reasons to try to gaslight the people into a war. And Operation Northwoods would have actually killed actual Americans who would know nothing about what was going on. So they proposed to kill their own soldiers. That's something that happened. Look it up, Operation Northwoods. And it was backed by the Navy intelligence community who came up with the idea. And then there was the famous WMDs in Iraq that I'm sure, well, maybe people younger than us significantly don't know the significance of, but this was a massive intelligence community, essentially lie that there were WMDs in Iraq, which are weapons of mass destruction, which caused the whole war in Iraq that lasted for a jillion years, where we basically stole opium and other things from the Iraqi people in exchange for a war, which cost many, many lives on both sides, which is disgusting. So take all of that and ask yourself, what safeguards exist to protect this from happening again? And if you find those safeguards, I would like to know about them, and you can put them in the comments. Because basically no change other than apologizing happened with all those things. You know, all safeguards failed for all those things, you know, in terms of FISA courts and all that kind of stuff. So in any case, now that I sound crazy, there's this connection with the intelligence community, and it's basically the perfect product, right, for the intelligence community, in that you find someone who has this massive idea that can monitor social behavior when they're just starting. You feed it through your In-Q-Tel program, sort of indirectly through the venture capitalists that are on In-Q-Tel, and then basically Facebook gets its first cash injection of $13 million from $0, which sort of blasts it off to the moon. And Mark Zuckerberg, you know, he's the spearhead of it all, disconnected from these agencies, but he can do what he wants to do in terms of what gets exchanged overall. Last fun fact, though, there's a In-Q-Tel product called Keyhole, which became Google Earth. So that's just another example of how these sort of government, private enterprise relationships happen. So Keyhole owned a whole bunch of satellites, and they were sort of doing a whole bunch of stuff. And then Google gave In-Q-Tel shares of Google, not money, shares of Google, which that's a whole other interesting thing, in exchange for Keyhole, which gives In-Q-Tel a good percentage of ownership of Google. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. What's the point of all this? What can we imagine if we take all that information about what we've learned about Meta, or what is now Meta, what used to be Facebook, and we combine it all together, and we ask ourselves, what is this real reality that we're looking at, that we're going into, or being hyped about, from all directions? We're being hyped about from pretty much every, major platform, that even the companies that should be saying, we would like to compete in this arena, are saying we would like to cooperate in this arena instead. What are we seeing when we put it all together? First, we have to understand why they want it to be blockchain. So blockchain brings immutability, which means you can't change it. So once things are written to the blockchain, they're forever. No matter if they get censored, no matter if you take it off, they're forever. So there's no data. They're like literally cannot be removed. Meaning, even if a agency or group or union says you must remove this content from your platform, they literally can say that cannot be done. And that's true, because it cannot be done. So it's immutable. I mean, they can remove it from being viewed, right? But they always have the information, right? It's forever. They make economies centralized. So if you get enough people on this platform and they're all using Facebook coin or whatever they want to call it, if they ever get that project going, I mean, you've got a large, basically sub-economy that you can sort of centralize, almost like you're the Fed, which is interesting, because the generation of coins, plus or minus, is all in your wheelhouse, right? It's all centralized, unlike the spirit of crypto to begin with, which is completely decentralized. They can also create a sort of too big to fail vacuum. So if you didn't know, crypto is like a multi-billion-dollar space. And if if Facebook can suck basically half of that space and create an internal economy, Facebook becomes so integrated into the economy that is too big to fail. Meaning the government basically guarantees its existence like a bank, basically, because it's so integrated into the monetary system. Meaning the government thinks that if it fails, the whole economy would crash and disastrous things would happen. Then there's validation and verification of ID, right? So now that it's crypto-based, if you have an account, it's now like a wallet, like a crypto wallet. And crypto wallets are, if you verify it in some way, since it's centralized, we can now verify wallets, right? Which is going to be your avatar, which means now Facebook can guarantee there's only one avatar per person. So this can be verified in a plethora of ways. I'm sure you could get around it in some way because it's not crypto itself that's causing the verification. It would have to be on Facebook's end. But now they can tie your personal, account permanently, immutably with you. So everything that you do in the metaverse that's recorded on the blockchain is permanently associated with you. So it's not just permanent, it's permanently tied to your account. And then there's NFTs, which is a huge discussion for another day. But basically, NFTs cause this reaction, which is like, okay, the NFT space is too dangerous, right? There's too many scams. But here at Facebook, please regulate us so that we can kill the decentralized powers that would never be able to meet the standards because by nature they're decentralized and could never meet the standards, right? So we're the only NFT space, or one of, probably the plurality of NFT spaces out there. And it also allows for real digital ownership. So when we imagine the metaverse, you can imagine that you're going to own a bed. You're going to own a TV. You're going to own, when I say own, I mean like NFT will be tied to your wallet. It cannot be stolen. And that'll be one of the sort of selling points is that it cannot be stolen. Like no one can steal your TV from you now in the metaverse. No one can steal from you your collectible item that's in your drawer. These are now permanently tied to you. And that's your card. Even if there's duplicates in the metaverse, right? Now it has a location in 3D space, which magically makes it feel a little bit better, right? NFTs. Now you have a place in your room where you put it. It's no longer a digital copy or something like that. That is in the vision of Facebook. And it also changes the psychology of ownership and all that kind of stuff, which is a talk for another day. It invites fellow IPs, so intellectual properties that are friendly to Facebook's mission. Take Disney, Disney's so huge. I was about to say a whole bunch of things that Disney owns. But take Disney, take a whole bunch of entities that own intellectual property. And if they're aligned with Facebook's mission and they see this as a good thing, then they can just invite those people into the space, and those people's thoughts and ideas will populate the space in a way that's completely controllable. So just as Facebook gives priority to traditional media now in terms of search and all that kind of stuff and what pops up and all those things, they can give priority to Disney, let's say, for placement on for an ad or a store or whatever. This sort of corporate monolith will be a lot easier to control than when you have storefronts and you have different online platforms where you can buy things. Everything is now one metaverse, right, that Facebook oversees. Other thing is that everything is now traceable. Your trade is traceable. If you give someone the card, let's say Facebook, maybe this is an anti-Facebook card, right? That someone created in some application on the metaverse. They created some NFT and they sold it to you for some Facebook coin. Facebook can now see that anti-Facebook card and say, well, we don't like that happening on our platform, but we also don't want to delete it because for fear that we're going to anger the fans of this artist or whatever. So what we're going to do is going to keep track of you and then keep track of who owns this thing, because now we know who's all anti-Facebook, right? And now we can suppress them in some way or whatever. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that exactly would happen, but I'm just using that as an example so you can imagine. And then they have controlled availability of what's even allowed to be bought, right? So like you couldn't, like in real life, right? You can pretty much buy whatever's legal to buy, right? On Facebook, because it's a private entity, they can control what is available to buy within their private metaverse. So, and without any claims of, discrimination or whatever, they have pretty large buffer in place because they're a private entity. They don't have to respect constitutional values or anything like that because they're a private entity. And the last thing is that they become even more of a de facto public square, right? So there's this whole interesting conversation happening around what is really a public square. Put that debate aside for a second, but imagine you spend a lot of your day in the metaverse, which is what they desire. I don't think that'll actually happen. That's, again, a story for another day. But in their imagination, at least the direction they want to take their company is, you're spending a lot of time in the metaverse. Now, remember what the Facebook whistleblower said, right? She said there's there's these internal studies about addiction, about mental health, and all this kind of stuff. Now, ask yourself, the very same media companies who blasted that story out, I can name them, actually. I found articles from MSN, CNN, CNET, Variety, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Business Insider, and that was just like the first page of Google in terms of what I found, or DuckDuckGo, because I use DuckDuckGo. That was the first page of what I found. Those people who blasted that whistleblower story are now saying, yeah, spend much more immersive time in the metaverse, where you're going to be more addicted, hopefully, is what the goal is from a business perspective. More addicted, more sad, more divisive, right? Because that was one of the things the whistleblower said too, is that divisiveness attracts time on the platform, right? So, okay, you can make it even more divisive if you're spending even more time on the platform. And now it's all like physical. It's almost like you're caught up physically into this sort of conversation that's happening. And yeah, that's what, to me, Facebook is gearing towards. And you just have to listen to what they're saying. If you watch the ad, just go watch the ad that I mentioned at the top of this. It is really weird, and also like comes off as like they don't understand how people work. Like, people don't actually work the way they think they do. I'm of the opinion, by the way, this is an absolute prediction. So their goal, so I've been seeing articles all over the place about how work is going to move to the metaverse, which is a terrible idea, right? So they can track everything you're doing at work. You know, they can track their competitors. They can track everything. Basically, there's no more divorce between your public life and your private life, right? You're doing this from your house. In fact, they can even track your physical movements, which they already do, by the way, in VR. They track your agility or all your different physical attributes. There are full body suits being created so that you can feel haptic feedback, like pain and other stuff on your skin. If you go watch, there's a conference recently at a tech conference. A huge tech conference. I forget its name. But I was actually just watching. Go ahead.
Is it CES? Is that a tech
conference?
CES.
Yes, CES. I was watching at CES, not looking for this content at all again, and some random company that's making a full body haptic suit, which means you can feel things like getting shot or like other things. You know, obviously not to the degree of getting shot, but you get what I'm saying. You know, these companies are all mentioning the metaverse. It was bizarre to me. I literally was not like looking for that at all. I was just watching some stuff from CES because I'm interested in VR from a business perspective for other reasons, and they were all mentioning like how this is going to make the metaverse more tangible, more real, more immersive. You know, people are going to want to be in the metaverse where they can experience things they could not experience elsewhere. You know, and do I think that's going to happen? Like, if Facebook had its vision for the metaverse, do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't think that has any chance of happening. Will it happen to a degree that's scary? Probably. If they keep going on the train and people sort of jump on the wagon, probably. But I think the takeaway is, our metaverse is bad. Like, are they just evil? No, they're not evil. Like, it's just like ultimately what most metaverses currently are they just places where people gather and play games, right? And when people talk about decentralized metaverses, the original culture that existed, mostly what they're looking to do is play games with friends and have a seamless interaction across games sometimes. It's more of like an informal thing. It's less Matrix, more just a VR game experience, if that makes sense. Less focused on spending so much time in the platform as much as it is providing a new way to interact with friends that you may not be able to see physically, or, you know, all kinds of things, you know, new types of games, you know, new types of socialization, all that kind of stuff. And I think that vision is perfectly fine. And the decentralized version is, I mean, much more savory to me in terms of, you know, what I'd rather be on if I was going to spend time in the metaverse. It would be amongst friends who are on a platform that is run by no one and, you know, connects with other people that's run by no one. And that's the threat. So if you caught my last episode on the Google thing, you know that I mentioned that as the threat to Facebook, because I segued into this episode beautifully, is that decentralized platforms are basically arriving. And not only they're arriving in force, and some of them are extremely popular. So, these platforms are gaining steam. They're clever. A lot of them are blockchain integrated, and they're commanding larger and larger audiences. So Facebook pretty much had to make this move now. Although I think they've been planning it for a while. The now was it, because without doing it now, then they might have been outcrowded and outdone by decentralized entities that provided basically only the benefits and none of the cons. There's my spiel. Told you it'd be long.
That was something. That was
took you on a journey.
I
took you on a journey.
Yeah, occasionally I look up at myself on the screen. I know I kind of look dead inside. It's just because I'm just trying to absorb the knowledge.
Yeah.
Very, very focused.
So what are your thoughts in the chat? I want to know. People stuck around, so I want to know what people think about my thoughts on the metaverse. In a moment, I'll drop all the links that I was talking about. I just closed the window that I had them in. They're mostly Wikipedia links and a few Forbes links. Any other thoughts about that before we move on? It's very late.
How do we profit from this? Sock clips.
How do you profit from it?
We are all of us here, are somewhat, or we wouldn't be here if we weren't, somewhat inclined to business practices, I guess someone would say. I guess, that sort of stuff. So I don't know, is there any way we could turn the greatest doom of our lives into something monetarily functional?
Yeah, I mean, mixed media NFT drop. Hey, I actually would love to make an NFT. I am not opposed to NFTs. I think we have to do a roundtable about it because there's a certain way that NFTs are really bad right now, and I wouldn't do it right now because I really don't. I'm not a believer in the space for the moment. But I really hope that if no big entity takes over the space, that we can have a very mature NFT space that just adds to, I guess, the culture of ownership that I think was bolstered by NFTs, but has been taken over by a bunch of grifters and scammers and a whole bunch of people who are honestly just extremely dishonest and take advantage of an audience who's addicted to gambling, basically. So I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily doing that this minute. But if the NFT market crashed, in terms of total value, and a lot of people got their butts handed to them and learned lessons about investing, maybe then we can explore a mixed media NFT if you're interested, which would be some interesting melting between our three talents, which would be wild. How do you profit from it? I don't know. I mean, I think there's so much room for innovation by small people, and that's the sad part, is because I think ultimately, if we keep going the direction we're going to go, they're going to be crushed. So, there's a lot of cool stuff happening. Like I said, I'm into esports. I do a bunch of esports stuff. It's totally the whole VR space, NFT space is totally up my alley on the esports world. It's perfect. But, I couldn't ever want to create something where people try to live in the esport, or live in the world where they're trading NFTs as if they're baseball cards or something like that, in some dystopian something or another. It's literally Facebook said, "Oh, Ready Player." I haven't watched Ready Player One. I haven't. I'm going to watch it eventually. But Ready Player One is about a villainous company that creates an MMO where they monitor what everyone does and everyone's addicted to it. Let's be that company. It's that was the reaction.
I'm trying to remember. That's John Williams, right?
It's Spielberg, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was John Williams.
I'm pretty sure it is. Oh, geez, I should. It sounds like it's coming into my mind as it is. If there's one Spielberg film Williams didn't do, and I'm trying to remember, that might be the one that Williams didn't do. I gotta look that up.
Yeah, he did not do it. The composer is Ellen Silvestri.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's the one that he didn't do.
Eventually I'll watch it. I'll tell you how related it is actually to what I just said. Maybe it's not that related at all. We'll find out. Okay, cool. I thank you guys for hanging around. It's 11:15. So guys, in the chat who are listening, what we do is we each have our own segments. And so Ben right now is going to react to your hot takes. Well, not your hot takes specifically, although if you want to submit your hot takes, you can go on Discord or drop them in the chat over here and we'll just react to them live about music. And so they're kind of randomly taken. He hasn't seen any of the ones except for the one he picked for himself. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up for that. And then after that, Nathan will review an indie game. So that's the order for today. All right, I'm ready to rock if you guys are ready to rock.
Okay.
All right, transition time.